you to introduce yourself and maybe say something about what you think is the state of the U.S. media, because Trump has been calling it out as the fake news. Just start off with your name and let us know what you think about the press over there.
Very good. Okay, you let me know when it's time to go.
Yeah, we're ready. I'm recording.
Hi. Tony, how are you?
Yeah, I'm fine. Can you just start with your name, Don?
Hi, my name is Don DeBar, and I am a journalist in the U.S., New York area particularly, although today, for example, I'm in Washington, D.C. I've been a radio journalist for 30 years, maybe 25, 30 years, and my areas of interest have been primarily international relations, particularly those involving the United States, and internal politics inside the United States. At this moment, it's pretty interesting to me, both as the details of what they're calling the Gaza deal are emerging, and a pause, I guess, to reload, I don't know. And also as Trump is about to take over the presidency here again this coming Monday. So there's a lot of stuff being written, a lot of stuff being said. You've got one of Netanyahu's coalition partners ready to drop out if they do a deal. He would lose as prime minister, which means he might go to jail. Iran is calling it a Palestinian victory, and people are saying. Not a lot of folks are. It seems like the only people that are hopeful about this are American politicians, and not all of them.
Okay, well, look, the key thing here is what do you think the potential ceasefire in Ukraine has got to do with Donald Trump? It does look like it's all, we've got, for example, we had Ed Davey, the Liberal Democrat leader here, doing a press conference today, saying what a disaster Trump is. It's terrible. We're going to have to rejoin the EU. These sorts of things. Whilst in the background, it looks like this genocide may be coming to an end. But it surely is tied to the big powers, like people like Trump, maybe Putin too.
It's hard for us to know what the hell's going on. Of course, we don't really see these things up close. We see them virtually streamed through the media. Even those of us that look at the whole, or as much of the whole of the media as one can from one perspective, it's still virtual. So you have to start with okay, let's assume that nothing I know is right, and let's look at what the possible things are. And so the possibility for the Ukraine war, of course, is either it's going to stop or it's going to continue and go to its logical conclusion along with us. And you look at Trump's role in there, he campaigned saying he was going to stop it. Either he meant that, or he was running as, a Pied Piper to draw the votes of people who wanted to stop. Or, and forgetting his intent, either he's going to stop it or not, because it's possible, for example, he intends to stop it, he gets in and finds out he can't, whatever. Either it's going to stop or not now, and either Trump is going to be an active player in making it stop, or he's not. And so, assuming that these wheels are allowed to turn, at least for a while, to make it look like you can elect a president on a major policy issue and have the president deliver. I mean, this is kind of necessary to uphold the myth of anything resembling a Democratic government or even a Republican government. Then it's good news. And the sounds that we're hearing back and forth from Russian officials in the main, and also from the American officials that count at the moment, it looks, I won't say promising, but I'll say looks more than possible that we're going to see a break over there. And since Russia's not willing to allow a ceasefire that would be an opportunity for Ukraine to reload again, then there will be some material change in the conditions there that would operate in favor of de-escalation and, who knows what after that. You have to keep in mind, of course.
Let me say something specific, Don. Let me just say something specific, because the Russians have flagged up. They are saying that they believe that if there is a ceasefire with Zelensky, it will be used as an opportunity for NATO forces to come into Ukraine, and then that will mean that the war will immediately light up again. That's what the Russians are saying.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. They're not going to allow a phony ceasefire. In other words, a reloading opportunity. They're aware of that. It's happened to them already. That's what the Minsk agreements, period was. And they've been very clear. President Putin, also former president, now Resident Bulldog Medvedev, people in the Duma, and people in the military and outside in intelligence, all on the same page on that we are not going to allow this war to stop except on our terms. And the key term here is the de-escalation is one on the ground where the material means of attacking us is withdrawn. And so, now here's the thing. I'm totally with that. If you look at a map of Barbarossa, for example, and then a current day map, even before this latest part of the war began in 2020, they took as much territory without firing a shot, almost, as Hitler got, banging into the Soviet Union. But so even if they redeploy back to the Elbe, which was the original agreement, the NATO countries, NATO's disbanded, and we're hearing some weird noises out of Trump about that too, and out of NATO. So whatever, we can get to that. But even if you put the status quo ante location of troops to say 1989, the weapons that they have now mean that, so you're not going to win the ground war, but if you nuke the hell out of everything, to soften the ground before you go in, what's the difference? I mean, there has to be some kind of a strategic change in the relationship that doesn't allow a clique that wants to have war the ability to make war. And I don't know how we get there at all. And certainly no one's discussing that in public.
No. Yes. So the characteristic of Trump is also very much to do. I mean, I quite like to see a Trump press conference. I remember them from his first term, where he takes on the press. So in other words, he'll say, "Hey, you're fake news," in the middle of the news conference, interrupt journalists with. I mean, I think it's quite important. I don't know what you think, but that you've got elected representatives, somebody like Trump, who's prepared to literally not to be bullied around by the press, not to be. I mean, we've had it with Rupert Murdoch here in Britain for many years, that most of the politicians are hypnotized by the press. They stand there, they don't dare to raise a finger against them. But Trump's not like that, is he?
Right. That's true. And again, part of what we're looking at, though, I mean, it's all delivered virtually. I would say a good part of it's staged, not necessarily on his part, although, he's a master at that. His career is image, okay? I mean, that's his product, too. He's built a lot of apartments and such, put some business deals together and such. But the main thing he does is license his image. That's like his biggest moneymaker. He knows how the media works well, and he knows how to work it. He's a real estate guy in New York, manages to get a press agent that wrangles him into movies, doing walkthroughs and stuff, so his name becomes a household name, give him a TV show, firing people, all this kind of stuff. So he knows that both sides of that. Nevertheless, I think it's useful in terms of raising the political consciousness of people in the United States and the political culture, if you could laughably call it that, somewhat, to see engagement and dissonance between a politician and a member of the press who's supposed to be asking them questions of interest to the people who the politicians are supposed to work for. And I'm not saying that that's what we're seeing here, but we're at least seeing a choreography of something that brings up the question of this in a space where before there was no question. For years, we've been watching like a dance between the politicians and the press, and like the dancing as a couple towards a cliff, with us being the ones that go over the cliff at the end with another war that they start or some other horrible thing that they sell us. And so just the fact of this dissonance, staged or not, is constructive. That's the first thing. Second thing is this. There's no question that the media is owned by a very small group of people, by a very small college of people, whatever the number is. It's in very few hands, and it has a reach into the billions among the rest of us human beings. For billions, or certainly in the United States, for hundreds of millions. It's the primary source of information about what's going on outside of their home and outside of their little community. And the people that have acquired that over the years and developed it did not do it for the purpose of entertaining. And clearly, if you look at the way the financial structures of these things were developed and exist, it isn't to make them profit machines. The profit is only, the finance is intended to sustain it. The purpose of it is social control. By controlling what people know, you can certainly circumscribe what they will do, what choices they will make. And this particularly is important where you have the political government structures that can engage real power, finance, ownership, all these different things, on the playing field and draw mass support in one fashion or another if it appears legitimate. If that thing is allowed to operate on its own, it's a threat to real power. And so the creation of the characters that play in it, the politicians, has been managed through this device, through the media. At least go back to 1960, okay, to the debate with Kennedy and Nixon. Way before that, go back to Hearst and Havana Harbor. This is something that it's obvious. I'm stating the obvious, but people don't mention it enough, and so it slides off the table when we look at these things. So what Trump is doing is either asserting a counter policy to that construct when he engages the media, or he's doing a new dance that represents sort of a reflection of our either effort or the public's beginning to reject the legitimacy of the system. In other words, you people have been really, really asleep for a really, really long time. You're starting to turn in your bed. Let's give you something new to put you back to sleep, or in any event to render you inert. And so you have Trump come in and he's well equipped to do this. He even owns a goddamn league, to do like wrestling. I'm gonna have like Bruno Sammartino take on the press or whatever, and they're gonna roll around on the mat for a while, and then everybody goes home best pals. Maybe that's what's up. I don't know. We're going to see this term, beginning on the 20th, we're going to see what this really is. There is no doubt in my mind that there is an actual political movement that consists of the masses of people, at least in the United States and Europe, that are standing up against the system that's been in place at least since the 1960s and 70s. It's been assembled since then. And there's no obvious leaders of this. There are the ones that are fed to us. They're the ones that cut through the haze of the media. And for me, a question is, did Trump cut through in actual opposition to the decision makers there, because he was able to do it with the cachet he had acquired as a media character? Because one of the stories is that they would have done the same thing to him in 2016 that they did to Dean and others. They just turned the microphone off when they're tired of you, and that they couldn't with him, because when they tried that, all the ratings for all of the news channels and newspapers dropped through the floor, and that they can't stay in business without that election year revenue. So is it that he came in actual opposition and he sort of fought his way to the microphone, or is it that they said somebody's going to take the microphone and start talking stuff about us? Let's get that guy over there. He's a brash-looking character. He knows how to play the part. Let's let him do it, because we know he's never going to be actually calling the people out into the streets. And he really can't, can he? He has to watch his language to not end up dragged out to the hoosegow, given the so-called insurrection. Like, none of us would have those constraints. If I had that microphone and I started saying, all right, all you all, this is enough, get out in the street, let's fix this. Okay, people would have to figure out what I did. With him, it's already proof of the original one, and they drag him to court over that stuff. So I don't know what's really happening. I like the form it takes, but I don't know what the essence of it is yet.
Well, look, the idea of breaking the mold a little bit, I think we need to understand also from the days of the Jackson 5, the Carpenters, Jimmy Carter, who passed away over the break. I'd like to hear from you, Don, what you made of him, really, because we've had this sort of, I look at this and my eyes start to glaze over. I think, hang on, maybe this is just a myth, that this guy was such a fantastic president, he was such a peacemaker, blah, blah. What do you make of his legacy?
Jimmy Carter? 2 words. Zbigniew Brzezinski. That's it. The grand chessboard. And what happened? They set up the collapse of the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc. I don't know. Lots of people now, and here, of course, then, thought that was a good thing. That we were on the brink of nuclear war or whatever, some major war, and the reason was because of the expansionist, horrible policies of the Soviet Union. I never bought that, and I'd been there too. I saw things much differently, including, the history of all of these things. But what happened was Nixon and Kissinger, and then Ford, he sort of stumbled through the policy, and then Brzezinski and Carter, but Brzezinski really sort of fine-tuned it. They engaged the Soviet Union and the Eastern European countries, the Warsaw Pact countries. They cooled down the rhetoric. They made a couple little peace things in other parts of the world, like in Vietnam, where there were, conflicts and whatever. They found a modus vivendi. And then they started doing commerce, although some essential strategic things were never done. That ended up being the undoing of all of it. Yes, we will now trade with you. We will not accept your currency. We will take vodka and give you Walkmans. We will give you blue jeans and our cultural stuff, rock, Western rock music. We'll take some of the wine, cognac, not too much though. It's that kind of stuff. So what ends up happening is in the Soviet Union, I don't know how it played in the other Warsaw Pact countries, but in the Soviet Union, which is the major part of the economy anyway, they ended up with a bifurcated economy, where I'm watching the new MTV stuff that I can see on my TV now, and they're wearing Jordache jeans and carrying a Walkman attached to their head. Where can I get that? The Beryoska store, the hard currency store. You can't buy that stuff with rubles. Well, everybody's got only rubles. Where can I get hard currency? Well, you go sell stuff, go dance or beg outside the International Hotel, or the people who buy fresh tomatoes and maybe they'll buy your rock and roll records or whatever. So now people are, at the end of the day, the truck carrying the tomatoes from the farm to Moscow, the tomatoes fall off the truck. The truck pulls up to the back of the Intourist Hotel or whatever, and now the son of or daughter or both of the truck driver is walking around with Jordan-ass jeans and etc. Also, they loaned money, so the state could buy a lot of these things, which helped to seed the market. And then, because of the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, which Brzezinski engineered in essence, they cut off the credit. And because they weren't doing any trade in Western currency, the Eastern governments couldn't maintain the loans, and they couldn't continue to buy these products that there was now a demand for. Japanese tape recorders, all these different things that, you look at these different economies. The Soviet Union was devastated in 1945, as was the bulk of Eastern Europe, Poland, for example. They got blown up. And then, when there's an armistice, there's the end of the war, the peace treaties, all of a sudden, there's a Cold War declared. And the United States, which didn't have a shot fired at it outside of far-flung territory in the Pacific, its industrial capacity almost double what it was in 1939, starts to pick and choose what's going to get renovated, what's going to get set back on its feet. And what it did was it set up countries all around the Eastern Bloc who then pointed guns at it. That was the environment that this other thing took place in. And over time, by the time I went there in 1990, the stores were empty, just like the mythology said they would be back in the 50s. They weren't back then, but by 1990 they were. And it was engineered that way. And that was Jimmy Carter's policy that did that. Now, was it a good thing that the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc fell down? I don't know if it was good for them or not, because absent that tension in the first place, how would they have evolved? But more importantly, what about the rest of the world? Because as the Soviet Union fell, what happened in Iraq? What happened elsewhere in the world? That's Carter.
Well, surely this is really Trilateral Commission, Rockefeller, Brzezinski. I wonder how much Carter really had to do with all that.
Well, he hired him. He made him national security.
Right.
He made him national.
Okay, so he's a hireling president, as most of these, obviously, with people like Starmer, it's very obvious he's a hireling president.
Right.
Look, going back to more up to the present, we've had all these fires over in California, Don. I imagine you've been covering quite a lot of that. And I've seen a lot of things popping up on social media, not on Twitter, but elsewhere, fact-checking this stuff. Can you take us through what you think's been really going on there? Because there's a complete tug of war basically over this is all due to climate, or otherwise this is a deliberate kind of austerity sabotage of Los Angeles' ability to fight these fires.
Well, you've got the things that you can know, that you can know with certainty, like the facts. And then you've got the things that, these are your best deductions, best guess, basically. Let me start with the things that we know. First, as far as the whole climate angle goes, let's jump back 200 years before Henry Ford rolled his first little Model T off the assembly line. before the first jet, before the first cow blew wind in a factory farm. That area was a desert. Why is that? That's the climate. It doesn't rain. The wind blows through there periodically like that. If you have kindling there and a spark, it burns and it's a desert again. Period. That's the geology of it. That's the climatology of it. There's nothing more or less to that. It was made to bloom, so to speak, with the introduction of irrigation, water, redirection, these kinds of technologies. So they bring in water, and they have wars over that. They fought lots of wars in the western United States over water supplies, over the Colorado River, look at the history of it. It's a huge aspect of the history. They were, you're doing cattle ranches. How much water does that require? It's a huge agricultural state, maybe one of the largest on the planet, looking at other nations' economies for agriculture. All of these things are water intensive. And then there's people, and they drink water. And you look at the relationship of all of these to the government that makes policy for things like water distribution, water management, in general, and see who's favored whom at which juncture in the history of the development of this. So there's lots of reasons. I don't have that kind of data in front of me, but I have looked at some, and I'm no expert. But this is like the broad stroke stuff. Is that the natural environment there is hostile to big city life, big city management. It tends to want to help it burn down by drying it out and then spreading whatever fire might come as a consequence. In terms of just to get an understanding of the carelessness that was involved in the construction of this, I did see some things during my time going out there. This is over the last, 40 years or whatever, since the first time I went out there. You have the coast, the Pacific coast, running the length of the state of California. I don't know what the hell is it, 1,500 miles. It's long. I don't remember how long it is. It's an 8-hour drive at 60 miles an hour from Los Angeles to San Francisco. So that means it's it's about 500 miles. That's about a half of this. So I'm going to say it's 900 to 1,100 miles from San Diego to the next state up, Oregon. I don't know, 10 miles in, there's a mountain range that runs a good part of the length of the state. So you have a basin between the ocean and this mountain range. It's partly, they call it the Pacific Palisades. There's other names for mountain ranges too. This is the geologically active part of the United States that you've heard of the San Andreas Fault and the California earthquakes and all that. This, you can see it physically there. You got the crust mushed in together, maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 miles offshore, and maybe a little more in spots. And so running along the Pacific, there's the Pacific Coast Highway, California 1. And then there's the 101, they call it Route 101, which also runs north-south, maybe the whole length of the state, much of it anyway. And then these mountains. So if you're down in the valley by the water on the west side of the mountains by the Pacific and look up, these mountains used to be covered with trees 100 years ago. A lot of them 60 years ago. And then they decided this would make they got great views, great place first for an occasional, castle or mansion. And then, hey, we could pepper these bad boys with condominiums and make a lot of money. And they did. and people piled into them. Then it rained. And the soil that used to be held to those mountains by the trees that used to be there washed off, along with many of the condos. And a lot of people that were in the condos, many of whom were never to be seen or heard from again, except in an ultrasound, search. Yeah, they're down there. This happened on such an amazing, I was amazed at the scale that this huge, ignorant insult to the physical reality of the place was allowed to happen. But I've spent 50 some odd years in real estate and title insurance and real estate finance business to know exactly how it happened. It was inevitable. Here's a big mountain with a view of the ocean. We could get it approved, that being the key. It's the same with the water. Just who's got the water and who doesn't is why this burns and that doesn't. And those decisions are political decisions made by, they're government decisions, I should say, but they're political as a consequence. And, that's the macro view of it. Who did what to make this or that happen? I don't know. I do know they've been underfunding the fire departments and the water infrastructure to deliver fire. I'm assuming that not just the children like us that know that these things happen in California, but the actual government officials charged with dealing with fire disaster and stuff understand the magnitude of the problem that could present without knocking the fires down early and thoroughly. And I don't know where they were when they were laying pipe to deliver water to things that might burn.
Okay, well, back to the future with Trump. Can you pick out a few of the his cabinet picks and tell us what you make of those? Because we've had some of the final hearings now that these people are indeed going to approved by the elected politicians in the Congress or wherever they are, congressmen, congresswomen, representatives saying, yes, it's okay, you can have these people. But can you just take us through some of those more interesting ones of the people we're going to see popping up in Trump's cabinet?
Yeah, I mean, again, I want to preface it. I don't mean to sound evasive. Because these things that I'm raising, I think, are the more important part that we're going to watch develop. Let's look at the question of. All right. Well, I don't know. What do you want to start with? Hegseth? It looks like he's going to be approved, right? So, I mean, the discussion, rather than being a discussion, all right. On February 6th, 2000, Donald Rumsfeld was in front of a Senate committee, or a House committee, excuse me, discussing the Pentagon budget. And then Representative Cynthia McKinney asked him about $2 trillion that was missing in Pentagon funds that Rumsfeld even admitted they can't locate, they don't know what happened to it. At that time, he blamed it on a computer system that they were using to manage their funds. So then she followed up a question, who's the company? How long has this been going on? And do they still have a contract? And if so, have you begun to prepare a bid for someone else? And the answer to all of that was that they don't even see a problem with that that's not. So this is 23 years ago. There's $2 trillion that missing, never showed up. You can only assume with the Iraq war and the war in Ukraine and every other thing that's happened in between, that more trillions of dollars are missing. And what did they discuss over Trump's choice for this stuff? Who, by the way, has raised questions about that stuff. They're discussing his drinking, what he thinks about women in combat, and the fact that he doesn't have any management experience for that job. Just like everyone else that ever got it. He didn't have it either until they took it. So the discussion that's going on, if either the Democrats are for real, and this is what they think is important, or they're playing footsie to get this guy approved. And then the question is, well, why would they do that? If we've had decades of outright massive theft through the Pentagon, why would everyone involved, I mean, Biden's been there since 1973, for example. The whole room it's littered with, people, they're 50 years with them, their beak getting wet, whatever. Why would they now back someone who's going to come in and do the things he's going to say? Well, of course, they're not gonna. So instead, they're having conversations about his drinking. So what's going on with the other ones? I don't know. To me, this is the biggest one. Who's he's got for the, what do you call it? Who's going to be what's her name? The woman that's going to be the Justice Department. The same thing. It's none of this stuff addresses any of the real. I mean, Trump got elected talking about Pam Bondi. Trump got elected talking about massive corruption, including wars that shouldn't take place, and billions or if not trillions of dollars being stolen, weaponizing the Justice Department, all these different things. He won a majority of the popular vote, okay? Like tens of millions of people elected him over that stuff. None of that's part of the discussion. So what are we looking at when we see this? And then why is it that's what we're looking at? Is there really going to be anything that's going to change as a consequence of this? I don't know. You got, let me take one. Tulsi Gabbard. I hope when she gets there, if she ends up being National Intelligence Advisor is a key thing there. He should have her as an advisor on national intelligence. Someone who's actually, not a psychopath. That's going to say this is what you should do. That has no relationship to whether or not Trump or whoever's implementing policy will actually do what she advises. But it's nice to have somebody in the room that has their eye on the ball, and I believe she does. I've met her. I've been watching her for a long time. I think that Bobby Kennedy did the same thing. If they put him in HHS, there's a very strong political sentiment because of the horrors of what happened with that whole, COVID, inoculation, blah, blah, blah. It was so corrupt and so obvious to people paying attention that it's a huge insult to the political, to us, anyway. So, and he's very strong on that, and he has been. Honestly, I'd rather see him at Pentagon or at Langley, overseeing Langley, to do a fire sale to close it down. When I saw him, I went up to see his campaign announcement in April of 2023. One of the things he said was, he's talking about agency capture. He runs down the list, because it's the same with HHS and all these others. You have all these people that are in the industries that are supposed to be monitored, that are supposed to be, regulated and make sure they comply with the law and with established practice, et cetera. and then instead it's a fox and a hen house arrangement. And he said, this is a guy whose father and a president uncle were murdered, most of us believe, by CIA and or other intel agencies. He said out loud, and he said that about his father, by the way. The CIA is a captive agent whose purpose is to provide ongoing wars for the defense industry so they can keep making profits. That's who I want in charge of Langley or the Pentagon or both, but instead he's at HHS. These other people, John Ratcliffe and Zeldin, Rubio, we know what he is, the Secretary of State. So you got this little dance that's going on right now. Biden's been president since January 20th of 2021, and the current condition of relations between the U.S. and Cuba have remained status quo. Status quo ante from what Trump left him. The last couple of days, he's taking Cuba off the list of terrorist countries, which is a joke. Cuba is not a terrorist country. It's not belligerent. The worst thing you've got to watch out for is that the bartender serves you too much Havana Club when you visit. It's a warm, wonderful country. The people are beautiful people. They're some of the kindest and most generous people on the planet. They've joined the medical field to go around the world to help people learn how to treat disease and such. It's disgusting that they even do it. But so he's going to takes them off the list. So January 15th, 16th. He's not going to be president on the 20th. So Trump with Marco Rubio, we're going to put him back on the list. The ink won't even be dry. Rubio, in my opinion, is Trump nailed him when he was running against Rubio in 2016. He's a greedy, power-hungry, self-serving little SH, you know what. But Trump has a knack for putting adversaries in a position where you give them enough rope to hang themselves. You look at John Bolton, for example. Bolton, American policy was going to be to topple the Venezuelan government. The Venezuelan government's still there. John Bolton is an outlier again. So some of these people read tea leaf, read into them that this is the true Trump policy. I don't believe that because that wasn't the case last time. There's that thing about watch the hands. In other words, it doesn't matter what people say, watch what they do. The proof in this pudding is going to be after these people take office, and not just what they propose when they come in, but what's actually allowed to happen as they're there. And so I think the answer to your question to me, what do I think of the picks, is that it's a mixed bag. There's some good people in there, real good people. I think Kennedy and Gabbard. Some good policies come out of the mouths of some of them, particularly Hegseth. It's going to be interesting to watch Bondi and the rest of them. I have no idea what they're going to do, and I think neither does anyone else, including in Rubio's case. I don't think Rubio knows what he's going to do. I do believe he thinks he knows what he's going to do. But
over Christmas, the Mossad people were on CBS over the pager attack saying, all the world is our stage. We are the producers. They were quite cocky about the extent to which they control the press in the West and the narrative. We had last time with Trump, I'm going to drain the swamp. Well, that didn't really happen. This time he's gone up a kind of gear, saying things like, which I was quite surprised to hear, I'm going to obliterate the deep state. Well, I wonder, is that even possible? Do you think he really wants to? Do you think this is just electioneering?
Well, it's certainly electioneering, and that's an interesting phenomenon. somebody says that and then gets elected on it. That is, to me, out of all of this, that's the important feature here. This is, movements make change, not individuals, it's my opinion. I think, in honest study of history, that's what you see. And that's an indication of a real movement. I don't mean a MAGA movement. I mean an actual, oppositional movement of the people against this monster that's being constructed around them, that has been constructed around them. I think Trump, one of his better angels, as they put it, which isn't a very good one, has him. He has a really good instinct for what people want to hear, and knows how, with that fumbly language of his, how to deliver exactly that. And yet leave many people scratching their head. What did he just say? Is there a deep state? Are we talking about that thing that they used to call the permanent government? I think Jack Newfield or one of them coined it. And of course there is. The terminology is so muddy in the public mind, the public sphere. The government is this structure under the Constitution and the state constitutions, et cetera. I guess that's what we'll use that word for that. And then there's, the forces, the people, the entities that make huge decisions that have, like fundamental impacts on society and the individuals in it. Which is a chicken and egg is hard to parse. Certainly in the group of people who are the actual movers and shakers of policy and events, you could term that a deep state, or a lot of people just term that the state, and they don't term the government the state, or they will term the whole Megillah the state. In other words, this state is.
I think it was philosopher John Dewey that said that politics is the shadow cast over society by big business. At the moment, featuring big in my view of what's going on are these people like Larry Fink, lovely surname, you couldn't make it better really, and BlackRock, who seem to be driving a lot of the policy both domestically and in these wars, taking over property, taking over farmland in Ukraine, masses of Ukrainian farmland, this sort of thing. And this is what this is doing. We've got this bizarre thing going on at the moment, Don, where our farmers are being told that if they die, their land is going to be taken off them, their wealth is going to be taken off them. But if it's owned by a corporation like BlackRock, they don't have to pay. So this is an obvious transfer. It's a bit like the old enclosures, or the stealing of the Indian land. It's a transfer of the land is really the only source of wealth actually out there, whether it's, whether you're talking about for farming or minerals or whatever. And so what they seem to be doing, people like these BlackRockers, hopefully most of us have seen films like The Corporation, read books like When Corporations Rule the World, is they've been kind of sucking the soul out of, the idea is families don't matter. They can't own property. They won't. And it's almost like we've got this kind of vampire in the mix here. So I wonder what you make of because BlackRock is clearly are going to be very powerful in Trump's America, possibly even more powerful in Europe.
I don't know. There's an interesting contradiction right there with policy in Ukraine, and that may be what's driving. It's almost pointless to have to mention it. It's so obvious. But Trump's background is in real estate, and so let's make peace in Ukraine. Let's cede Eastern Ukraine to Russia, no problem. They're Russians, let them stay there. If they feel better, fine. And let's own all the land in Western Ukraine. And if the Russians want us to keep weapons out of there, fine. We don't want weapons in there. We want to be the breadbasket. We want to own the breadbasket of Europe. That may well be the plan on Trump's agenda.
So, look, I mean, it's a bit cheeky to ask you this, really, because I mean, but it is. There's something soul destroying about this new world. I mean, I've seen it coming in my lifetime, from the emphasis on family businesses. As the corporates take over, it's like the high street, small shops have all gone. It's all just chains now. They're doing the same now with the agriculture, kicking off family farmers here and in Europe, and replacing them with corporates and gigantic robot-run greenhouses. So what can we do? Is there anything we can do about this? I worry for the youngsters, Don. I don't know about you. I look at them and they're sort of. It's like the idea of education back when we were growing up was to do with you equip the person to make the best for themselves and for the country in the world. Now it's just we want them to fit into some corporate peg somewhere, into some little hole. So I want you to, if you can, address this kind of soul-sucking nature of the modern Western world.
People have been describing and predicting it, at least since, I don't know, 1848. Before that, I mean, Marx wasn't the first. One of the things that I wish I had the time to study, because I really want to, and I think it's an important area to study to understand what we're looking at now, is what happened on the ground in the transition from feudalism to, the early guild, whatever, capitalism. Because you have different forms, the landed gentry, so to speak, whatever the hell term you guys use there. You maintained the form of government that you had with some changes and some, uprisings. They did away with that here. You had an older economy. There was no pre-capitalist European economy here. That was they kind of started by destroying the economy that was here, the natural economy, and imposing early capitalism, and I guess you could call feudalism what they had in the South. But somehow there were all these different institutions that were tied to, related with the whole political economy, I guess, to use it, all-encompassing term, as it changed. Like what kind of things were happening individually, like in government forms and in the way they regulated the economy and all of that. Because I think we're at a point like that again. That's my point. I think that whatever came into being at the end of the feudal period, it has ended. And it feels almost like there's being a new feudal, like a global feudalism being constructed, like a corporate feudalism. Only if it's on a global scale and it's highly mechanized, what's the problem? What was it? It was Lenin, I think, said in Russia in like 1918 or something. Communism is socialism with the electrification of the country. The implication being that you would have, the idea in Marxist Leninist language, thinking, whatever. Socialism is a transitional period to communism. Communism, from each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. That the society is so plentiful, you don't have to be forced to do anything. You're going to do the work that you're interested in. There'll be plenty of stuff for everybody. You can take what you want. Nobody needs to take more than that because there's plenty. That's the ultimate, utopian idea. The transition period is they term socialism in this construct, and so as that happens, you have the state or the people using the state or whatever agency taking control of the property, of the economy, the means of production, and managing it in a way to generate that land of plenty so that you can have communism. And in Lenin's mind, in 1918 or whatever the year it was around then, electrifying the Soviet Union with the vast resources and the industrious population, you would have communism like that. So now we're looking at a feudalism globally being constructed with an architecture, involving AI, computers, robots, every damn thing in the world, a completely automated global economy that won't even need consumers. How many, I listen to these people that talk about, depopulation and all this kind of stuff and think, you guys are really like off the hook sometimes. Don't drop the acid so often or whatever. But when you look at some of these developments and ask yourself, where does this actually go? One of the almost obvious ones is that very few people are planning to own and run the planet for themselves, and they don't need us. And they're not really willing to share a lot of resources to keep us. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's like a kind of, second, a new wave. So the English Civil War, we see a lot of us anyway, as where feudalism was finished with, and the landed classes were elbowed out of the way for the capitalist class. We've now got the finance capitalists in charge. Industrial capitalism seems to have gone out the window.
Right.
And we have a kind of transhumanist mega elite of people that just will eventually just be able to discard anyone that's in their way, I guess. Anyway, but Don, it'd be interesting if people can follow you. Where's the best place for listeners to get hold of you on social media, listen to your radio broadcasts or whatever?
Okay, I'm at Facebook, Don DeBar, DonDebar. At Twitter, it's at Don DeBar, same spelling, no spaces, @ Don DeBar. On YouTube, use the Google search in YouTube for Don DeBar, DON space DEBAR. I have a YouTube page with hundreds of videos and radio broadcasts and all kinds of stuff. From there, you can find me in a whole lot of other places.
Bless you, man. And thanks very much for your time. Don DeBar, thanks very much for joining us again.
Thank you too, Tony. Appreciate it. Love speaking with you.